You can order the control arms used in the video on the CarParts.com website via the link in the description. Turn your engine off and set the parking brake. Pull on the hood release handle and open the hood. Loosen the stud bolts on the front wheels. To be able to replace the control arms on your vehicle, you need to remove the wheels to gain complete access to the suspension system. Lift the front of your vehicle. Place the vehicle on the jack stands. We strongly suggest watching our video on how to jack your Toyota Camry safely before carrying out this step. Don't forget to put the wheels under the vehicle. You can now see your car's control arm. You must then separate the front lower ball joint from the control arm. Brush the nuts holding the lower ball joint and spray them with penetrating oil. Using a ratchet and an 18mm socket, unscrew the two nuts holding the lower ball joint. Brush the lower ball joint retaining bolt and spray it with penetrating oil. Then unscrew it using the same tools. To access the front control arm retaining bolts, you need to remove the transmission mount. Brush the lower retaining nut and spray it with penetrating oil. Then unscrew it using a ratchet and a 17mm socket. Do the same with the two lower nuts located in the frame. Brush the mount's upper retaining nut and spray it with penetrating oil. Then unscrew it using a 19mm wrench. Using a crowbar, separate the lower ball joint from the suspension wishbone. Inside the engine compartment, loosen the engine mount retaining bolt by a few threads using a ratchet, a long extender, a gimbal, and a 17mm socket, which will allow you to remove the transmission mount without forcing it. Then, using the jack, push up on the transmission, not on the oil pan, in order to lift the engine and to be able to remove the transmission mount. You now have access to the two front control arm retaining bolts. Spray them with penetrating oil and unscrew them using a ratchet and a 22mm socket. Using a ratchet and a 19mm socket, and a 19mm wrench, unscrew the rear control arm retaining nut. Then remove the bolt. You can now remove the control arm by pulling it towards you and moving it back and forth. Brush and grease the control arm area to facilitate its installation.
Hey, it's Alex from CarParts.com. If you enjoyed this video and want to support us, like, comment, and subscribe. Okay, back to work.
You can order the control arms used in the video on the CarParts.com website via the link in the description. Take the control arm. Retrieve the spacer from the old control arm and install it on the new one. Put the new control arm in place. You can tap it with a mallet to properly insert it into its rear housing. Next, reinsert the bolt. Loosely screw the nut back on to hold it together. Replace the two front retaining bolts of the control arm, then screw them back in. Finish the tightening of the bolts with the torque wrench. Replace the transmission mount. Then lower the engine using the jack. Screw in the engine mount retaining bolt. Screw back on the upper retaining nut of the transmission mount. Finish tightening using a torque wrench. Then, screw back on the lower 3 retaining nuts of the transmission mount. Tighten the nuts with the torque wrench.
You can purchase the parts we used here by visiting our website at CarParts.com.
Replace the lower ball joint in the control arm. Then, screw the nuts and bolt back on. Finish tightening using a torque wrench. Then you will be able to put the wheels back on your vehicle. During this operation, you will be intervening on the front axle of your car, so it is advisable to perform a wheel alignment afterwards. Put your vehicle back on the ground before properly fixing the wheels in place. Operation complete.